ring if you're ready to care. Oh, let's talk power, let's talk speed. Hosted by the one and only WETOODEEP. Turn it up loud, feel the power in your seat. This is Slapping Me, yes, Slapping Me.
And what is good, everybody? It is your boy WETOODEEP, and we are back with another episode of the Slapping Me community show. And we got a big one for you. We got a long episode. I don't know how long it's gonna go. We got a pretty big topic here. As we discuss and we go in the ropes. There's a big topic that I want to discuss and to go into in depth, as I always do. Y'all know me. We're not staying surface level. We're going to touch the things in the topic that other people wouldn't touch, right? And let me back that up. Say no diddy on that one, because I know what y'all thinking. Because I thought it too. No diddy on that one. But let's get serious here. When we go forth and deep, we'll recap week 7. We'll list my top 5 teams of the week, and we got some pretty big questions. We got a long list of questions from the Discord, from B-Master, from Kara, the queen of the Slapping Me community, and we'll answer those as well. If you want to get your question answered, we answer questions every week. Go join the Discord. Link is in the description. And with that being said, let's jump on it. Before we get to the big topic in the ropes, right? We're going in the ropes. Before we get to the big topic, 2 other things that I want to talk about. First off, let's talk about this guy, Sami Zayn. Samuel Insane. That's his name. I made it up. I don't know. Should be his character name, Samuel Insane, but it's not. But Sami Zayn, this man, the man who I've been trying to put over, that I've been trying to convince you guys in the Slapping Me community that you guys should start cheering for Sammy because he's going to go over. They're giving him his moment. Y'all better be you know what? Fuck all that. Excuse my language. Bump all that shit. This man is soft as Charmin. Doesn't surprise me. He wants to fit in with the soft as Charmin fans in the IWC. This man, I'm scrolling because he loses to Ilya Dragunov last Friday. By the way, Dragunov's back, the Mad Dragon, my favorite wrestler. If you were to ask me a year and a half, 2 years ago, who my favorite wrestler on the planet was, it would be the Mad Dragon. He's been hurt for the last year, and he's back. He returned last Friday to win the United States Championship. So I went to go search this. His account pulls up. I go to click on it because on the where the bio typically would be on the preview of the account says Sami Zayn has blocked you. So I click on the account on X to see what this is talking about. And this man, Sami Zayn, blocked me. I don't know why. I've never engaged with Sami Zayn to my knowledge. I don't know why I was blocked. It probably has to do with it has to be one of 2 issues. More than likely it was my take on something to do with Palestine. I don't remember ever talking to Sami Zayn or mentioning him or replying to him at all. So I don't know what this comes from. But I guess we can add Sami Zayn to the likes of Sean Ross Sapp, JD from NY, Jim Cornette and a host of other fans who have blocked me on X because they don't like the way that I think. They don't like my opinions, and they're soft as Charmin. No matter how great they are in the ring or on the microphone, they're soft as Charmin. And I'm willing to call them out on that. The second thing before we get to the big topic that I want to talk about is last Saturday night was AEW Wrestle Dream. No, I'm not going to talk about the show. Didn't watch the show. Don't care about the show. But I will tell you, I saw let's back up a little bit to last Wednesday. I saw their promo, their vignette, cinematic vignette promo on the show, on Dynamite on Wednesday. I knew nothing about the storyline going into the pay-per-view. But if there's one thing you all know about WETOODEEP, it's that WETOODEEP loves him a good cinematic promo. And they sold me on this match right here in one promo without any prior knowledge of what was going on in the story. The one promo was fire. It was fire, right? Continue to tell me through evidence, empirical evidence, as we continue to try on NXT and in the wrestling business, we've seen this, that cinematic promos really are how you can tell stories outside of the arena, right? And they sold me on this idea of this match. So we get to the match, and I'm not going to say I remember the whole thing. I'm not going to say I even paid attention to the whole thing. But you had to know something stupid was happening, right? You had to just figure out the two people in the ring are the two edgelords of AEW when it comes to putting on cringe spots and matches. The only thing that would have made this more cringy is if you put Hangman Page and Swerve in it with some type of needle drinking blood. But I was hooked. I was like, I'm going to give this match a chance. Right? Instead of just absolutely just completely overlooking what this could be. Right? And you had me hooked on this feud. But you had to figure something stupid was going to happen. And it did. In the middle of this match, the Wish version of the Shield, the Death Warriors, Death Riders, whatever the hell they're called, they go out and grab a fish tank. Now, question, who the hell has a random-ass fish tank? They fill this thing up with water in the middle of the ring, and they begin the process of drowning Darby Allin. Now, I don't care if this was at midnight. I don't care if the kids were asleep. I don't care. None of that matters to me. This is stupid. This is absolutely stupid. When's enough enough? Are you going to actually have to kill someone? Because here's where the issue comes in. Here's where the issue comes in. The issue isn't necessarily that you're drowning someone. Problem in and of itself. Probably not the biggest. Like, I'm pretty sure Warner doesn't want that happening on their programming. Right? If they could choose not to have someone drown on live television on a pay-per-view hosted on one of their platforms, I'm sure they would be like, you know what? Let's not do that. The bigger issue is, where do you go from here as far as what more can you do to be more edgy? Because that's the problem with that style of wrestling. With the hardcore style of wrestling, is it's never enough. It's like an addiction, right? When you start being addicted to something, right? You can be under the influence with just a little bit, but eventually your body will build a tolerance, and you need more, and you need more, and you need more, and eventually it'll come to a place where you're never satisfied. So my question is, where's the line you stop and say, hey, we maybe don't want to cross this? I think that was years ago when you were jabbing needles into people's lips and drinking blood. I think you passed the line back then, and you've just continued to go further and further and further across the line where as an in-ring performer, you're risking your own life and limb in a performance that doesn't require it. But then I'm sitting here thinking from a fan perspective, you're telling kids how to kill each other, and a fan is going to end up dead because they're going to try to mimic this spot. And you could tell me all the time, well, that's why they put the warnings, don't try this at home. Those are legal things for the company safety. That doesn't mean, let's be honest here before we use these excuses. How many of y'all saw in the Attitude Era and the Ruthless Aggression Era, do not try this at home? And how many kids were RKOing and all of that stone cold stunnering, tombstone pile driving your friends on trampolines? I know that's what I did growing up. Right? We had a trampoline, and we acted like it was a wrestling ring. Right? Like, at what point is enough enough? Right? At what point do we sit here and say, you know what, the RKO is kind of dangerous, but if a kid does it on a trampoline, more than likely they'll be okay. Right? But if a kid says, hey, we're going to replicate Darby versus Mox, we have a fish tank. Come here, brother. Let me put your head in the fish tank. Someone's going to die from it. That's the next logical step in this, right? Someone like Sarah Stock, who has not only wrestled but have been trainers for WWE and AEW. She comes out and she essentially calls this out. And says this isn't the best representation. That there's a line here, and right, and she's getting blasted for no reason other than when you critique AEW, the weirdos in the sicko cult come out of the corners, they come out like roaches, and they start attacking you for attacking AEW. And it's not really an attack, it's just it's constructive criticism. You call something out about AEW, and the roaches come out and they start attacking you and saying that you're a hater, you're an fed shrill, you're a bot, you don't know wrestling, that it's not that serious. Right? It is that serious, right? And then you end this with an even stupider moment, by the way. So the lights go out. Darby sort of is let out of the fish tank because you can't murder someone on TV, right? And this is real life action, so like you can't pause. Like now, hear me out here. Hear me out here. If this was a cinematic match, and because that's where it differs. That's why I think if you want to do this hardcore style of matches, doing them as cinematic matches where you could stop in between scenes and pick up and you can do some of the things in a safer environment, right? To make it more movie level production, I'd be fine with that. My biggest issue really isn't the kid issue. My biggest issue is Darby could have died. Right? And because you don't want to kill Darby, now you got to fake the spot a little bit more. You have to expose the business a little bit more with John pulling him out of the water, when the purpose of that is for him to quit. But he's not going to quit if you're going to pull him out of the water to breathe. But you have to in order to do the spot without killing Darby Allin. Right? So how do you fix that? Well, you turn the lights off, and it comes back on, and Grandpa Sting is sitting in the ring, and he has baseball bat in hand, and he breaks the glass fish tank. This was more reckless, I believe, towards the fan base, where you had glass literally shattering all over the place. Could have ended up in the front row. Who knows? Right? And so you have Grandpa Sting. So here's the thing. I never, ever want to hear an AEW fan tell me and lecture me again on how WWE is bringing back all the old timers. I don't want to hear it again. Because in a spot that did not need Sting, Sting showed up. Right? So I don't want to hear you talk about Undertaker on NXT. I don't want to hear you talk about all the old timers like Goldberg coming back for one final match. I don't want to hear about none of that. Because you guys just brought Sting back in a spot where he really necessarily isn't needed. Right? So those are those two little things. So let's now go deeper in the ropes. And we're going to talk about what the episode is titled on. It's the idea of, every so often, this idea gets brought up by the IWC. That something happens, whether it's a release or something, and they start talking about how unfair the treatment is in WWE. Notice, they want to try to make it seem fair, so they'll be like, oh, well, no company in wrestling's perfect. But they never name any other company when they start giving examples of poor practices, right? They want to talk about poor practices, and all they do is list WWE, but they never talk about Phoenix being held hostage, but we'll talk about Ali. Well, they don't want to talk about all these other people that AEW could have easily released. We're talking someone like a Britt Baker, who obviously no longer wants to be there, and you don't see fit to ever bring her back to television. Why is she still, why she's at contract? Because you're doing the same thing that WWE does. AEW is doing the same thing WWE does. And guess what? They have every right in the world to hold Britt Baker hostage because she signed to them. Now, if Tony Khan really cared about the business and cared about pro wrestling, he would let Britt Baker go, but he won't. Why? Because he knows that she would show up on a Tuesday night and completely steal ratings from Dynamite. That Britt Baker coming over to the Fed would completely destroy ratings on a Tuesday to Wednesday. Because Britt Baker would automatically draw more fans, I believe, to NXT's product. And that's where I believe Britt would start, would be NXT. I think some call-ups are coming. And so it would not surprise me if Britt Baker in the near future shows up in the Performance Center. But every so often, when some major story in the catalyst for this debate is Andrade's situation, which I'm not fully familiar with. Here's what I know. Andrade was released, or really he was fired. And from what I understand, he was fired with cause for failing some sort of health exam or fitness test or something, right? He broke a rule that was in his contract and he was fired because of it, right? Which, by the way, is how any other employee would be treated in this company. If I broke any rule, especially like a major infraction from my company, I would be fired. The company that I work for, I would be fired. That's just how business works. If I owned a company, you signed a contract saying that you would do this is your responsibilities, and you break that, part of the punishment for that is you no longer have a job. That's real life. That's how the real world works outside of mom's basement. Right? And so Andrade then shows up on AEW television to zero applause, by the way. Like, zero pop. No one cared. Or, well, let me take that back. They cared for a week. They cared for the pop. Oh, my God, Andrade's back. But they didn't care the 18 weeks he was never on television and he was complaining, oh, well, we don't need him. You know, he can go to WWE. We don't need him. And then he shows back up. Oh, my God, Andrade's back. All right? So Andrade shows up, but then that's the only week he shows up. He's not there the next week. So now people are starting to ask questions. Why bring him back if he's not going to be a major part? And so now things are being leaked from dirt sheets, and people started investigating, and it comes out that Andrade had a clause in his contract, which apparently is standardized in the WWE contract, that if you're fired for cause, right, meaning you broke the rules and you get fired because of it, right? You're not released. Your contract doesn't expire, right? You broke the rules. You get fired because you broke the rules. That the non-compete then that's on you for being fired without cause, or excuse me, being fired with cause like Andrade was. So he broke the rules. That the penalty for that is you can't work in the industry for a year. Which, by the way, guys, a year is standardized for anyone who leaves any, so I did some research on what the average non-compete clause for someone who leaves an employment opportunity, right? So, for example, if I worked at Apple, now this is a bad example because Apple is hosted in California, and California made non-compete clauses illegal. So it doesn't necessarily work. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go to Tesla. Tesla moved from California to, I believe, Texas. If I worked for Tesla, and I worked for Tesla as someone who designs, their tech, right? And I decide, hey, I no longer want to work here. Here's my 2 weeks. More than likely, part of my clause of me signing to that high-level tech position is you cannot work in a direct competitor and the average non-compete is 6 months to 12 months. So about half a year to a year. That's the average non-compete. That's sort of standard in the business, or in the world in business, right? And so WWE's non-competes are just 3 months if you're main roster, and 30 days, 1 month if you're NXT. Unless you break the rules and you get fired. And now they're a year. Why? Because when they release you, that means they have no creative plans and they're ready to write you out. When you get fired for cause as a disgruntled employee, they probably had plans for Andrade. By the way, they had him in a major program, or about to be in a major program with Phoenix. And because Andrade wanted to be selfish, now Phoenix sort of is non-existent on SmackDown. So he didn't just hurt, he didn't hurt himself. He hurt Phoenix in the process, right? But, so WWE sees him show up on TV, and they send a cease and desist. And say, you can't be on TV, you have this non-compete that apparently Andrade didn't tell nobody about. So now Andrade's not on TV, and it appears he's not going to be able to be for a year after his date of being fired. Right? And it comes out conveniently today. Samantha Irving posted as well. Completely different topic, I just want to mention it. That she's halfway through her non-compete, which was a 2-year non-compete clause. I could understand why that would be the case for her, because she was the top announcer in the business. Why would WWE want, like first off, everyone's forgotten about her abilities as an announcer, right? And so why would you let her leave and then immediately go join the competing business, right? That's standard in the business, right? Is 2 years excessive? Maybe, right? But standard is at least 6 months, with more companies leaning towards a year, right? So nothing about Andrade is different than any other corporation or business, right? But what happens with these conversations is when something like this happens, mistreatment is yelled about WWE, and then someone always has to bring up, excuse my language, I mean this with zero disrespect, quite retardedly, they bring up the idea that wrestling needs a union. And the person that I heard that did this was someone that, is well known to the channel, well known to the community. It's Junkyard James. He went on his show Beyond the Junkyard on Saturday and did exactly this. 33 minutes long on why wrestling needs a union. And I listened to the whole thing, the whole painstakingly long 33 minutes. And every single point that he made was emotionally charged. It's poor treatment. And here's what it comes out of, right? Every time the idea of a union gets brought up, and this is in wrestling and just in real life in general, I'm 100% all the time across the board anti-union. Because I'm anti-union because unions are anti-competition. Right? But here's also the reason why I'm anti-union. Unions are communistic as all could be, right? I am a conservative. I am a, someone who believes in economic freedom. I believe in free market capitalism. I don't believe that's what we have right now. We have a mixed economy. We get taught that in high school, by the way, that we have a mixed economy. This is right. This idea that we're economically capitalistic in this culture and society nowadays is absolutely wrong. We are corporatist. I'm anti-corporatism, right? Meaning I don't believe that Amazon should own the internet, so when their server farm goes down on the East Coast, the entire East Coast internet goes out, basically, where you couldn't use Snapchat, and you couldn't use McDonald's app, and you couldn't use your banking apps, and you couldn't use Amazon, and your Ring camera stopped working. And if your light switches or your thermostat was an Amazon branded product and it required access to the internet and AWS, guess what? You couldn't turn your lights on. Like, I don't believe that should happen. I'm definitely not pro-corporatism. Don't hear me when I say this. I'm anti-union because I'm pro-free market capitalism. And to be pro-free market, that requires you to have zero regulation on the market. And unions are regulations on the market. But I'm also anti-union because I've seen what unions have done to industries. Right? We've seen what happened during COVID with the teachers' unions when we're in Chicago. The teachers didn't go back to school or wouldn't go back to teach because the union said that we need more money. And so kids missed out on their education. The community suffered because the union wanted more money. Because if the teachers make more money, that means the union reps get more money. And I see the type of bullying tactics that union workers push on non-union workers to try to get them to join the union. At the end of the day, unions are no different than communistic, a form of communism. In fact, this is actually sort of exposed within they made a biopic on Ronald Reagan that I can't think of the dude's name off the top of my head. The movie's called Reagan. Dennis Quaid. Dennis Quaid played Ronald Reagan, and it goes through the life of Ronald Reagan. And he was in Hollywood in the 30s, 40s, 50s. I don't think 30s, but the 40s, 50s, 60s, right? He was in that area in Hollywood, right? And how communism was rampant in Hollywood, and that there were unions being formed, and he didn't join. And in fact, his sort of goal in life when he was in Hollywood was to sort of expose the communistic union power that and what was going on, right? That movie was very interesting. But so James goes on, he makes this 33-minute episode solely on why WWE has to, or not really WWE, but solely why the pro wrestling industry should unionize. So the first thing I have against his argument is he says, well, wrestling needs to have something like SAG-AFTRA, which is the Hollywood Actors Guild, the Screen Actors Guild, right? First off, I need you to understand by definition, SAG-AFTRA is not a union. It is a guild. Two different things. Just definitionally, two different things. So that's the first question that I have is, well, what do you want? And we'll talk about guilds at the very end of this segment. But I have questions. Now, I want to be fair, right? I questioned him on Saturday in a one-on-one chat between me and him. Cody was a part of the group chat, but Cody doesn't really participate in the group chat. I'm just going to be honest with you, right? So it was me and James, right? And I was asking him some questions, and I said, well, I just want to be front with you on Tuesday. I'm recording, and I'm going to talk about this. And I'm going to mention your episode, and I'm going to react to it. Here's an open invite to come defend yourself. He said, I don't want to defend myself. I don't have to defend myself. It's my opinion. And guess what? It is his opinion. He's allowed to have it. But I don't think he stretched his opinion to the furthest extent to think about some of the questions that I immediately think about when I hear this type of argument that wrestling needs a union. That the wrestling industry as a whole needs to unionize. And that they need to get together and they need to unionize for fair treatment. You know, this is how, by the way, it's communistic. The premise of communism, of Marxism, communistic type, not theology, but ideology, Marxism essentially states that there are two groups of people. You have the oppressed and you have the oppressors. And that is the worldview that every single thing that in life is viewed through. Who are the oppressors and who are they oppressing? That's communism. And so the conversation here, and James made these emotional arguments, WWE is the tyrant, the oppressor, right? The wrestling industry not being unionized, or they're oppressing, with WWE being the major example, they're oppressing the people who come to work for them. Which is just absolutely crazy to begin with. No one forced them to sign the contract. We'll just start with that statement, right? But here's some questions, right? So let's say a union happens in the pro wrestling industry. Let's start with the first question. Who makes the standards? There has to be some sort of standard for what a company has to do when they join the union. Who makes those standards? Do the companies get to make their own standards? Well, that's not going to be fair. Do the wrestlers get to make and form the standards of the union and what's required? Well, that's not fair either. So it's going to be a third party that has nothing to do with the business. So it's going to be a third party. Okay, so maybe we answer that question. Who sets the standards? Who's going to ensure that the standards are fair not only towards the wrestlers but towards the business? How often do you negotiate your collective bargaining agreement? The second question that I had, how does this work for the independent scene? Because, and this is how I know that the people who make these arguments either A, are just ignorant because they work in the business and they understand how the business works, but they're still ignorant, or B, they've never stepped foot in the business and don't understand how it's run. How does this work for the indies? When most independent scene promoters are making dollars, like pennies to the dollar, on fine margins when they run shows. Being a wrestling promoter running an independent show is not going to get you rich. It's just not. You run margins. You make pennies on the dollar in profit. Some of these don't even make profit. A lot of indie shows lose money every time they run a show. So how does joining a union benefit the indies? How does that get monitored? How does that get monitored? How does it work for the indies? You know, the people who are so pro-indie, they talk about unionizing, and that's the biggest way to kill the independent scene ever. That's the biggest way to kill the independents, is to force them to join a union and pay fees, and by joining the union, now it comes into my next question. Can union workers work for non-union promotions? And the opposite, can non-union workers work for union promoters? Essentially what I'm asking is scabbing allowed? If you don't know what scabbing is, go back to the NFL in the, the mid-'80s, early '90s, when the Scabs were playing for about the first 6 weeks, right? The NFLPA went on strike. The NFL players went on strike. So what the owners did was they'd open tryouts, right? Vince Papale is one of the major known names of this era, right? Who was a scab. And what does scab mean? That you're a non-union worker who works in the industry, and they essentially take the jobs of the people on strike. Is scabbing going to be allowed? More than likely, I could tell you how unions work. More than likely, no. That if you're a union promoter, you can only use union work. What does that mean? If I'm an independent guy, if I'm an independent promoter and I join the union and I can only use union workers, that means my expenses go up. Because there's going to be standards that are probably not fair to me as a promoter. There's going to be standards where there's going to be a low tier, or there's going to be tier. I don't know how it'll officially work. Again, what are the standards? Who sets the standards? That's a big question. But it doesn't benefit the indies at all. The next question then is, what happens when there's a strike? When a union starts and the union workers say, we're not making enough, these indie scenes, these big companies are not paying me what I'm worth, we're going to go on strike. They don't, or they do what the WNBA women and the WNBA did this past offseason, where the CBA was up and they needed to renegotiate, and a strike was being talked about. What if that happens in wrestling? Here's what happens. The scabs will come in. And wrestling is not a centralized... So this is why using sports leagues like James does. Well, look what happened when the NFL got a union. Look what happened when the WNBA, they have a union. And the NBA... Here's the problem. Wrestling is not a centralized business. What do I mean by that? The NFL's union works because to play pro football, there's no other league at the level of the NFL to go play for. There's no other level. Right? It's centralized. The union for the NFL is for the NFL. It's centralized. How does a wrestling union work? The answer is it doesn't. And when a strike happens, all that's going to happen is the promoters are going to leave the union. They're going to hire the scabs who will work for less. And more than likely, the union workers, the union wrestlers who join the union, when they go on strike, will never work again. Because that leads to my next question. Why would any promotion join a union, pay union rates, have to pay fees to be in the union? Why would any promoter hire union workers when they could pay less money and get non-union workers? There's no real reason for that. Logically, there's no reason for that. Why would I, as a promoter, spend more money when there's plenty of work of people who won't join unions or don't join unions, who are just getting in the business, or right? If I know of some wrestlers who are at if I'm WWE, why won't I go to my training centers that I have in WWID and say, hey, don't join the union. You could be my developmental. You guys can train my wrestlers for me. All of these people who join the union, we'll fire them. And you guys can develop new talent for me over time, and we can just fill those spots up. And we'll pay you more than what the union will pay you to not join the union. Why would WWE not do that? Say, hey, we'll pay the schools more. We'll give you more prestige. You guys could be my developmental, and we can have younger, unknown talent that we can pay cheaper salaries to. Why would a corporation not do that? Because that leads again to my next question. It's what stops wrestling companies like WWE, like AEW, what stops them from just firing all the union workers? Oh, you joined the union, you breached your contract, you're fired. What stops them from doing that? And the answer is there is nothing. There's nothing, right? And my final question is, if you formed a union in the United States, that is not binding in New Japan. That's not binding in Canada. It's not binding in Mexico. It's not binding in Europe. It's only binding in the United States. So how do you regulate these policies across the whole market globally? And the answer again is you can't. Unions are practically impossible in the wrestling business because of legal issues, because it's not a centralized business. There is more talent than needed in the industry. And so if top names start joining unions, they'll be fired. They'll be replaced with less the entire industry crumbles. The indie scenes crumble if they are forced to join right? And essentially what you'll then have is WWE versus AEW, and those would be the only two companies in America that would exist in the pro wrestling business. It wouldn't kill AEW, it wouldn't kill WWE, but it would kill my local AML if they had to join a union. If the top names joined the union, it would kill the indies. If even small names, imagine being an up-and-coming wrestler with a year or two under your belt and a union forms, and you're a union rep walks up to you at a show and says, hey, if you join the union, you're guaranteed, well, what's your rate now? Well, you're getting paid $100 a match. Well, if you join the union, there's guarantee pay. The lowest you can be paid is $500 a match. Some of those talents will sign to union, right? But again, what stops WWE from going to their roster and saying, hey, a union formed, it's going to kill the indies. Stay here, we'll pay you more. What stops TKO from saying, don't join the union, we'll pay you a little bit more, just don't unionize? What stops it? What stops it from happening? Right? These are questions, right? So then you could join a guild. So a guild, you ask, well, what's the difference between a guild and a union? Well, good question. The difference between a guild And a union is, sort of put simply, it comes down to scope, purpose, and some sort of, a historical context. So a guild regulates training and apprenticeship and sets standards. So that's like the Writers Guild or the Directors Guild, which protect the standards, negotiates contracts, and provides training, right? Whereas a union is more about workers' rights, right? So they negotiate wages and hours and conditions. Where, again, a guild is more about, training and resources, right? Guilds focus on professional standards within a particular craft, whereas unions, again, are about the rights of the workers. And so, sure, wrestling could form a guild, right? So the guild is more so about the craft, whereas the union is about the individual workers, right? A guild is about the industry. The union is about the individual workers, right? And so you could form a guild to protect but again, you have the same issues of all the questions, right? The indies cannot afford to join a guild and to pay higher rates, right? When most of these promoters are running very thin margins and making very thin profit. Here's why I am a proponent, because the next issue you have is you can't have a union if the wrestlers are independent contractors, right? And so what that would end up forcing everyone to do is having employership. You would need employees. AEW wrestlers would be employees. WWE wrestlers would be employees. You're not an independent contractor, right? And so that's how you can guarantee things like health insurance and salary and pensions and stuff like that. Health care. And every time you hear independent contractor in a wrestling circle from the IWC particularly, it's always in a negative connotation. But the IC, I'm going to call it the IC model, the independent contractor model, the IC model, in wrestling has more advantages than disadvantages, right? It's controversial in a lot of industries, but in wrestling, it's actually beneficial. Here's why. It allows for flexibility for the promotion, right? I'm gonna pull up. I had all of these points written out here. I'm gonna pull this up real quick. Pull these up real quick. Why is the IC model the best? Here's how. Flexibility for the promotions. Here's the points. Promotions can book talent as needed without needing them for long-term obligations. Matt Cardona, I need you for a 4-week program. We'll pay you this much per appearance. Here's what we need you to do. You agree? Right? We'll pay you for... And that's why a lot of wrestling contracts used to be on an appearance-based deal. Right? We need you for 32 weeks. Or let's sign a 12-match contract and we'll negotiate afterwards on a future deal, right? So there's flexibility for a lot of these smaller promotions that say, hey, I just need you for a week. I need you for 2 weeks. Can you do 3 shows for us this year? Right? Smaller indie shows can hire bigger name wrestlers like a Matt Cardona for one match or one event and help manage the costs. Again, they're running small margins. A lot of these fans, they've never had to contemplate what it means to run a business and what margins are and profit. They don't think about that, right? And then the larger promotions like WWE or AEW can scale their rosters up or down depending on the creative need, tour dates, the TV schedules, etc. Right? That's why the independent contractor role is good for. That's how it's good for the promotions. But how is it good for the wrestlers? There's a lot more freedom in the IC model. Wrestlers aren't tied to a single employer and can actually work multiple promotions in a weekend, right? I know some indie wrestlers before COVID really changed the way the independent wrestling worked a little bit in terms of COVID really centralized some things in certain regions, especially here in North Carolina where I live, where we had I can remember having 12 promotions in North Carolina, small promotions, and now I can only name 3. Just because we have DPW, we have AML, we have Apple City up in the mountains, and I know there's a couple others that are smaller that work. But we used to have PWX, which was big names. Andre Chase came from there. Some big names in the indie scene would come through. But I think PWX is closed after COVID. And if you're, I remember there was one dude that I really liked in PWX. His name was Drew Adler. He still wrestles in Georgia and Florida. But he worked a Monday to Friday job, and Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, he was on the road wrestling locally in Carolina, Florida, or Georgia. Right, and I think Tennessee maybe. And so a lot of wrestlers do that. Their entire weekends are, I'm going to this show on Friday night, this show Saturday night, this show Sunday night, and there's freedom there to make more money rather than saying, well, I'm in part of the union, I can only work for union shows, or well, my contract says I can only work for such and such. Right? There's freedom where and when you can work, which allows them to build their brand, try different characters, and gain exposure to different markets, right? So if I'm a wrestler, I'm Randy Bennett. Let's say that's my name, Randy Bennett, right? That's my WWE name. If that's me, I could be a cowboy out west. I could go to the Northeast and be something different and try a different character. I can come down south to Florida and be a different character. Right? I could try things out and build a brand. In the modern indie, you can't really try out things because things spread. But theoretically, that's what the independent scene is for. Is I could try out different gimmicks. Maybe you sign me and you need a villain, and so I could play a villain in the Northeast. And then, I can go out west to California and you need another villain, but the villain in California is different than the villain in say Massachusetts, where Massachusetts I could be, the villain could be a Yankees fan, which I would never play, just I couldn't allow myself to play that being a Red Sox fan. But you get the point, whereas if you need a super villain out west to get over a babyface in California, bro, just off rip, I'm thinking of, depending on who it is, let's say you're trying to put over Gustavo. Well, I can come into California as a white dude, 6'2", little bit jacked, come in looking like the Shield and play an ICE agent, right? And I could try that, and it'd be the biggest villain, get booed out of the arena, get my paycheck, lose the match, and go on to the next city where I go down to Florida, and I'm going to be a good guy. And so I walk in, playing another game, right? You see what I'm saying? There's freedom within the independent contractor role and model, right? There's creative autonomy, just like I was trying to explain. Independent contractors can maintain more control over their character, their style, their storylines, especially on the indie scene. Well, I don't want to take that booking because it's going to make my brand look weak, right? Or whatever, right? Promotions can hire talent for specific creative needs. Like I was just saying, hey, we know you play a really good villain. Can you come in and be this ultimate villain to take this loss so that this babyface we're trying to build for our audience can get over? Absolutely. Here's my rate. Can you afford it? Tell me when you're available? I'll come, right? Promotions, again, can hire talent for that specific need. It's cost efficient, right? Again, from a business perspective, promotions aren't responsible for these benefits like healthcare, retirement plans, or overtime. And this then keeps ticket prices down, merchandise prices down, overall operating costs down, which then allows more events to happen, which allows wrestlers to get paid more, right? And I think a lot of them are fine. Should you have resources? I know a lot of promoters who, if you get hurt in my ring, will pay for it, right? And that's sort of off the rip. Right? If you get hurt in my ring, we'll pay for your, you break your leg in my match, we'll pay for your surgery, or we'll pay part of it, or we'll help promote your GoFundMe. Right? That's not being like a bad promotion. That here's ultimately before I get to point 5 as to why the independent contractor thing is so good for the industry, is ultimately no one is forcing you to sign a contract. No one is holding a gun and saying, hey, work for us or else we'll blackball you in the industry. Guess what? If a union was formed and you didn't join the union, or you scabbed and took non-union work, you would be blackballed by the union. The union would blackball you out of the industry. You wouldn't get work. We've seen it all over the place, right? People could say that unions are good for Hollywood. That's not true. It's just not true. SAG-AFTRA, the guild, is not benefiting Hollywood at all. And we've seen this because the type of roles that get played, the type of movies that get made, they all suck compared to 70s, 80s, 90s, right? And the people who get these roles that are, they're part of SAG-AFTRA. They pay the dues. They sort of simp for the big people in the guild who run it and make all the money. And the people, and by joining the union, you're promised certain roles. And if you don't join, that even if you're a better actor, you get passed up for roles because you don't join, right? That's how this works. It's very bully type culture. It's communistic in culture. It's not free market. It's not a meritocracy where the best actor gets the best role. It's, well, you joined the union and you're a good union supporter and you go on strike and you protest and you fight the system, right? So we'll give you this role, even though you kind of suck at being an actor, right? That's how it works, and that's how it will work in wrestling as well. So 5th reason is that it encourages competition and growth, which is ultimately what we should care about, right? Wrestlers can move freely between the promotions, creating more natural competition for talent and creativity. Promotions are then incentivized to offer better pay, better exposure, and better creative opportunities to attract that competition and to attract that top talent. And this dynamic keeps the industry vibrant, diverse. Here's what we've learned over time. Industries that don't have unions often have better pay, often in terms of, or better freedom, better flexibility, right? Here's what would happen, right? If we removed the regulation, the corporatist regulation off of our economy, removed the corporations, removed any regulation, remove the unions, remove the guilds from our economy, and we were strictly merit-based, free market economy, here's what would happen. Yes, some companies would try to exploit workers. And guess what? They wouldn't have workers. So they either go out of business or they raise their standards. Right? So I'm a top wrestler in the business, and WWE wants me. In a free market economy, I could say, well, listen here, Nick Khan, Tony's offering me more money. He's offering me health care. He's offering me better benefits. I'm going to work half the dates. I'm allowed to have time off. I'm only going to work pay-per-view weekends and, 2 episodes a month. And I own 100% of my brand that I could use, and I can work indie dates. Guess what? I will 100% agree with you. The AEW system of allowing people to work indie dates, I do agree it's better. 100%. I'm not going to dispute that. Right? In a free market economy, everything that AEW offered me, I could take to WWE and say, here's what I need. I need that same work schedule, the same benefits. I need you to give me health care. I need you to get me travel or whatever, right? You pay, right? AEW thinks I'm worth it. Do you agree? If not, I'm going to sign with AEW. Right? The free market allows for more negotiation individually, on an individual level, not in a collectivist level. It allows for more negotiation where the top talent who has earned their spot gets what they want. Right? More competition, higher pay, better incentives, better work environment, all the things you say you want. By forming a union, which won't come when you form a union, ask any union worker, it's not going to come. It's not happening. Especially in wrestling when it's not centralized. Joining the union might as well just be saying, I never want to wrestle again. Right? So I end this conversation before we go forth and deep. We talk about football. I told you this was going to be a long episode. My final question is, how are unions beneficial to the business? Someone explain that to me. Someone explain it to me. How are they beneficial? Answer the questions that I asked. How does this benefit the business? How does it benefit the wrestlers? How does it benefit the indie promoters? I don't care how it affects WWE or AEW. They're rich. They're the corporations. They're the ones at the top. They're not going to suffer from this. What I'm looking at is, okay, well, they're not going to suffer, but AML, my local company, is going to suffer. Pro Wrestling Guerrilla is going to suffer. The indie scene in Europe is going to suffer. Not really because it's in Europe, but the indie scene in America will suffer and die. And there's less work here in America, and so now you can only get work in Europe or Japan, and there's not enough companies there to sustain that, and so less opportunity. Monopoly by AEW and WWE. And so effectively promoting the use of unions in pro wrestling is essentially saying we want to kill the indies. And you may not see it that way, but when you draw your conclusion to the very end, when you push out your opinion to the very end of how far as it can go, a lot of people don't have that expertise. A lot of people don't have that ability to push their ideas and their thoughts all the way as far as they could go. No one has that ability, right? To do that a lot of times. And when I do so, now I'm a hater. Oh, you just don't understand. You hate wrestling. No. I care about the business. If we kill the business, the rest, it doesn't matter how good AEW and WWE treats their people. They can only have so many wrestlers. Right? The business dies if you form a union. You can deny it all you want, but the business dies. All right, so we'll go quickly through week 7. Not really a lot to talk about as far as like big time games here. A decent week. I'll say this: things continue to happen in the NFL that make zero sense. I did an episode a couple months ago before I joined the shows together. Again, still on the YouTube channel. Called how the NFL can technically rig games and script games. Bro, the script writers, if they do, and I kind of believe they do a little bit, or at least script situational things to happen within the records, the script writers are on one this year, baby. And there's not a single thing I could predict can happen this season, right? But we're going to talk about our Deep 5. Now, Canvas was down on Monday because Amazon was down, right? And that's the website I use to make all my graphics, or the app that I use. And typically on Mondays, I post my Deep 5 to get a reaction, and then I come and explain it. Well, I don't have that yet made, so it'll be made after I record this. But anyway, the point that I'm trying to say is here's my Deep 5, and we're going to start at number 5. Number 5 on my Deep 5 is the Dallas Cowboys. We got to give the Cowboys the credit that they're due. They walked in, they stomped on the Commanders, who I thought was going to win the division. Stomped all over the Cowboys. The Cowboys came and stomped all over the Commanders. And are, they had a really good season. They had a really good week. We can't take that away from them. We got to give it credit where credit is due. Number 4 is the Cleveland Browns. This is a team. Sure, they're 2-5. This was essentially the battle of who is the second worst team in football, because the Jets have the worst team in football, and the Dolphins have the second worst team in football, without a doubt. This was just a beatdown of all beatdowns. Quinshon Judkins is a beast. He's the only dude who can really score. He had 3 touchdowns. Dylan Gabriel did okay. He's still growing in that offense. Tua played like we knew he would, right? But for now, we got to give the Browns their credit. It's their second win. I get it. They're not a good team. But for the individual week, the Browns are my 4th best team. Number 3, the Los Angeles Rams. This is a very good football team. And they came in. They were playing the Jaguars. They were playing them in Wembley Stadium. And the Jaguars got absolutely smashed. The Rams came in and they handled business. And we got to give the Rams again their credit. The Rams did their thing. The number 2 best team this week is the New England Patriots. And for a lot of reasons I'm going to mention in Patriot Corner, so hold on for that. But without a doubt, the best team of the week is the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm here to tell you right now, as we stand through 7 weeks, Tuesday, October 21st, as we stand, the Kansas City Chiefs are tied for second in the AFC West at 4-3. After would be a 3-way tie if the Giants didn't blow a massive lead and allow Denver to win. But Kansas City, 1 game back from first place. They're the best team in the league right now. Thoroughly convinced of that. I'm thoroughly convinced that they have Rashee Rice back, they have Pacheco, they have Hollywood Brown, they have Xavier Worthy, they have Mahomes, they have Kelsey. I don't know who's on the defense, but it doesn't matter because they're going to score points. This is the best team in football right now. I'm calling it as we stand right now. The best team in football is the Kansas City Chiefs. I told you all, you thought they would be done early. They just had to go through the first 6 weeks, get their stars back, And they're the best team in the league right now. I don't realistically see a game that the Chiefs could lose the rest of the season. I don't realistically see a game where they could lose. Now, they're on Monday Night Football this week against the Commanders, Week 8. I predicted the Commanders preseason to win this game. Things are working in the favor of the Chiefs in that there's a lot of injuries on this Washington Commanders team with Debo, McLaurin, Jaden Daniels out, questionable, maybe will return for this game. If that's the case, it might be a little bit closer than I assume, but I may have to change my pick from the preseason, right? But you got the Commanders. You go in the next week and you got the Bills. You got the Broncos. You got the Colts. There's some hard games left for the Chiefs. Realistically speaking, though, I don't see a game the Chiefs will lose. I do believe that Chiefs will finish 14-3. And they'll win the next 10. And they will either win the division, which I think that would put them as the winners of the division, or they will get a wild card, like a 5th seed, right? And find their way. I think the Chiefs right now, if I had to pick who I think could go to the Super Bowl today, almost halfway through the season, I'm picking the Chiefs from the AFC, and I'm picking I wanted to say Tampa. I would have said Tampa to represent the NFC, but Tampa got the ass kicked by Detroit. I still think Detroit's the best team in football. And I want to give them an honorable mention for the Deep Five. Them as well as the Bengals, who beat the Steelers. Not the best, but some honorable mentions, right? Seahawks as well played really good last night. But there's that. So let's go to Patriot Corner, and then we'll end predictions for Week 8, and then we'll do some questions, some speed runs here. A lot of these are going to be easy, but there's some deep questions at the end that we got to talk about. Patriots Corner. This Patriots team is really exciting. I'm trying not to drink the Kool-Aid all the way, though. Trying to remain optimistic while being realistic. But I realistically, outside of Tampa Bay, and I think the Giants game on Monday night might be a trap game. Coming off of, or coming into, so we'll finish that Monday night game, and then we'll go into a bye week, and then we'll go home and play Buffalo after the bye. I think those are the 3 games left on the schedule that I'm scared about. And outside of those games, we're sitting at 5-2. We're the 2 seed in the AFC right now. We have more wins this year than we've had the last 3 years. On a season basis. I realistically don't see a world where we have less than 12 wins. I just can't see that happening. 10 games remaining. I think we win at least 7, which will put us at 12-5. That's the worst case scenario for me, 100%. Defense is on fire. That offense is on fire. Drake May's there. I like the culture. I really don't want us to trade anyone. I know there's rumors that we're going after A.J. Brown or Chris Olave on the receiving corps. I don't want to. I like Kayshon Boutte. I like Stephon Diggs. I like Pop Douglas. I like Hunter Henry at the tight end position. I like Kyle Williams as a 4th stringer. I like the team we have. I do. I really like this team. I would not make any moves at the deadline unless there's something that would 100% fully benefit. Like Trey Hendrickson, I would go edge rusher because I do think we need a little bit more pressure. We're good. Harold Landry's great. Milton Williams is great. Caleb Chason is great. But a Trey Hendrickson would be fun if we want to, get off of Keon White. But I don't know how that ultimately overall benefits. You see what I'm saying? I think we got a culture with Vrabel that's a winning culture. Players will die for Coach Vrabel. I'm a fan, and every time I hear Coach Vrabel speak at 400 plus pounds, haven't played athletics in over 10 years, I want to get up off of the couch when I hear Vrabel speak and run through a wall for him, right? This is the most excited I have been about the Patriots since Tom Brady left the team, right? That's all I got to say about Patriots corner. We did what we needed to do. We took care of business, shut them out in the second half, did what we had to do. Anytime you have your backups coming in for the last 10 minutes of the game to keep Drake May and the starters healthy, we're good, right? And here's what I noticed. We cleaned up the fumbles. We cleaned up the turnovers. We cleaned up the penalties. And just like I told you, we do that. We're an unstoppable unit. I truly believe that. Sometimes it's not about overall talent, but how well you work as a team, right? So with that, let's go into predictions for Week 8, and then we'll hop into these questions. All right, Week 8, we start Thursday night, Vikings at Chargers. I'll go with the Chargers. We'll head into Sunday with Dolphins, Falcons. We'll go Falcons, Jets at Bengals. We'll go Bengals. Browns play New England. New England's going to win at home. Giants at Eagles. The Giants already beat them. I think they go into Philly and beat them again. I really do. Bills, Panthers. As much as I would love the Panthers to win this game, the Bills are winning. Ravens, Bears. The Bears are winning this game. Texans, Niners in Houston. I'm picking the Niners. Tampa versus New Orleans. We're picking Tampa. Dallas versus Denver. This might be an upset. I'm picking Dallas. Titans, Colts. I'm picking the Colts. Green Bay at Pittsburgh. We're picking Green Bay. And then Monday night, Washington at Kansas City. And I am picking the Chiefs officially as we stand with the injuries. And even if they were healthy, I probably would still pick Kansas City. Kansas City's on a roll right now. But Kansas City will win Monday Night Football. All right, let's hop into the questions from the Discord. All right. Easy question to start. Would you rather have world peace or kick the winning field goal for the New England Patriots? I would rather kick the winning field goal for the New England Patriots, right? I don't think world peace is accessible, so I don't think about that at all. I would rather the Patriots win a football game than to worry about what's going on in parts of the world that aren't peaceful. I'm asked another question. What is my thoughts on WWE using AI to book matches? I think as we have it now, it's not going to be the greatest product being generated because AI is so far behind in this type. I've tried to do this, and everyone's laughing at the model. They try to put in book a story, and it had Bobby Lashley, doing some stupid or whatever or not, right? Well, that's because AI is still not programmed past 2021, right? And so it's behind. And so, but here's what I'll say. As a tool, now if they want to use AI to just book the whole show so that they don't have to have creativity in the writer's room, human creativity where they could just put the computers together to book the show to make it easier, I'm not a big fan of that. But what I do like is similar to how, I write stories now, right? I'm sure I told you guys that. By the way, the link to the first story that I wrote, When Faith Finds You, is in the description link to buy on Amazon if the website's up. With that being said, I'm not against it in that I view AI as a tool to help human creativity. When it begins to replace human creativity is where we have a problem. But when it can help take the ideas of human creativity and make them better, or give ideas, or to refine things, or or to be used as a tool, I think it's fine. I don't have an issue with it. He has, I have to retire one, revive one, or release one. So we'll start with retire. Retire AJ Styles, Seth Rollins, or Roman Reigns. This one's probably the hardest to pick which one I would retire because AJ's already retiring. Honestly, all three need to retire, but if I had to pick one, I would probably go ahead and just have AJ Styles retire. Just honestly, I have to revive one, Hulk Hogan, Eddie Guerrero, or Scott Hall. I would revive Eddie. So my assumption is we're reviving them back to when they died. That's how I looked at this. Now, if we're going off of back to their prime, I still probably take Eddie, so it doesn't matter. But Eddie Guerrero, when he died, still had 10 to 15 years left in his body to give to the business, right? Whereas Hogan and Hall were a little bit older when they passed away. So that's the way I looked at the question, was reviving them back to when they died. But even if it was back to their prime, I still think Eddie Guerrero was a better performer than the other two. As much as I give credit for Hogan for keeping the industry alive, I think I'm reviving them back to their prime in current wrestling situation. I would rather have Eddie. And then I got to release one, Brock Lesnar, Braun Breaker, or CM Punk. I'm honestly releasing CM Punk. I think he draws the least of the three, just personally. Brock Lesnar's a moneymaker. I'm not going to get rid of him. Braun Breaker's the next Brock Lesnar, in my opinion. And then CM Punk is just CM Punk, right? B-Master asked me, you end up dead by Kara, but for making fun of the 49ers, which I do a lot. But deep down, she's a good person, and she reincarnates you into any mythical creature of your choosing. What are you coming back as? I'm coming back as an Anunnaki, because Anunnaki, according to those who believe in them, not me, but according to those who believe the Anunnaki, they had all the knowledge in the world, and they actually are the reason human beings came into being. If you know the Anunnaki myth, so yeah, I'm choosing that. A question here, B-Master also asks, is there a double standard for being a belt collector, or is it deeper than that because of the people shouting racial slurs at Mercedes, but you don't say anything about the Hardys when they are doing the same thing? Also, where's the hate for Gable/Kaiser? I think a lot of people recognize, first off, there was a lot of hate for Gable. Now, he was loved in Mexico, because here's the thing about Mexico. Mexican fans understand the gimmick, that it's supposed to, that's the one thing I like about the Mexican fan base, Mexican wrestling fans, AAA, CMLL fans, is they're so used to gimmicks. It's a lost art in the American scene of having a gimmick. And because your gimmick made your career in Mexico, like your career was based upon who your gimmick was, what your character was, what your mask was. It wasn't necessarily about you as an individual, but who was your character, right? And Mexican, and so that's why I believe the Mexican fans loved the gimmick. Whereas in America, they're like, oh, that's racist. Well, it's not really racist. It's a heel gimmick, right? I don't necessarily think there's a double standard, though. Now, I definitely will not condone or say that it's a good thing for any fan to shout a racial slur at Mercedes Moné. I don't think that that's a good thing for the business. But that is the IWC for you. I think there's a difference between what the Hardys are doing, because the Hardys have the NXT, the TNA, they have those for a partnership, ultimately for the goal of probably dropping them at Halloween Havoc to another team. I haven't watched NXT, so I don't know if they've been booking towards that this week. They have the Hog titles, and I think those are the only three that I know of that they have. Whereas Mercedes now has 12 titles. None of them mean anything. They're never on television. They never get defended. for no reason. They sure she just defended the TBS right, but here's the thing, like Mercedes is 100%, like as a wrestling fan I'm embarrassed. Like there's a secondhand embarrassment for her and anyone who thinks that what she's doing is good for the business. Right? I don't think there's a double standard. I don't have an issue with people who work the indies having like 2 or 3 belts. I don't. It becomes an issue though when you have 12 and you never defend them. Right? Because that's not beneficial for anyone but yourself. Here's one of the big questions. Here we got to Kara's questions. So here's some of the big questions here that Kara asked. We'll start with this one first. Knowing who I am, you are a very creative person. We know you have had ideas. Tell us a time in your life where you came up with an invention. What was said invention? All right, guys. I'm very passionate about this one. Gas prices are way too high. I know Kara knows that, living out in California where they're much higher than they are where I live on the East Coast. Gas prices are way too high. Even, I'm going to say this and Kara's going to hate me for this, but even the $2.80 that I paid for gas this week is too high. Whereas Kara's paying like what, $6 a gallon in California or out west, right? I know you're going to hate me for that one. But I had this idea one day. I like to eat. Like, I'm not a big fan of stopping at a drive-thru, like parking the car and eating. I'm going to go to the drive-thru. I'm going to continue my journey, and I'll just eat while I'm driving. I'm a master eater in the car. Right? Master. I've mastered it. But the issue comes, I'm lazy, and a lot of times the trash never leaves the car. Right? I'm just lazy. I forget about it when I get to my destination right? And so I had this idea, like, why don't we create something that can take this trash, burn it into energy, and direct it into my fuel tank? So if I go missing, I don't know how to do that. I'm not a scientist. I don't even know how we would even consider doing that, if it's even feasibly possible. I might look it up on ChatGTP. So if I go missing, just know that big gas is coming after me. Big oil is coming after me because of this creation. But it's all Kara's fault if I go missing. But that was an invention I had. I'll tell you another one. Sort of on the same vein with things just costing so much. Why haven't we figured out a way to create a system where people could buy, like, at home and do their own oil changes? Or, right? So essentially what I'm talking about is, like, I go to Valvoline to do mine because they were supposedly cheaper than taking it to a dealership, but not anymore. But the system that they use is really not all that technologically advanced. They just use like a vacuum system. They put it in the oil, where you put the oil in. They put it in there. It's a vacuum system that sucks all the old oil out. A lot of times they don't open the pan, and so they take the oil out from the engine with this vacuum. They sort of recycle it, and then they pour in the new oil. Well, why haven't we created a system where, hey, you could buy one of these for like $500 and do your oil changes yourself without much help or without needing to take it to a company, and you could save some money. And then you could maybe bring your oil to like Valvoline or something, and they'll pay you for the oil to be recycled, or you pay them to recycle your oil or something like that, right? But also on that same vein, like, why haven't we created cars with jacks already installed into the chassis? So if a tire goes out, rather than having to show someone how to jack up a car, you have jacks already in the frame that you just push a button and it jacks the car up for you. And now you can do your work on your car if you want to do it that way without needing a jack stand or any of that. Just things like that that I contemplate. Again, I'm not a scientist. I'm not an inventor. I don't know how all this would work. Someone could probably steal my ideas from me, and that's perfectly fine, right? But those are some of the things that that I've thought up. All right, so we'll go with the fun question first. The NFL has come to you, WETOODEEP, saying we are adding 8 new expansion teams, 1 team for each division, and for each major city that doesn't have a team. You get to pick a city and team names and what division they're assigned to. Who are they? Now, I went a little bit further and I made logos for each team as well. And I put in the Discord, here are the logos. You guys guess what teams these are. Right? So, let's start with the AFC. This is going to make sense if you see the logos, by the way. Go in the Discord, the logos are there. You'll figure out what is what, right? The AFC East. So right now, we have the Bills, we have the Patriots, we have the Jets, we have the Dolphins, right? Well, the 2 big teams in that division right now are the Patriots and the Bills. Well, we're going to expand, not to London, not to Europe. We're expanding north a little bit. And the AFC East is going to be the now, third or fourth sport in American sports. And we got the NHL, the MLB, the NHL, the MLB, the NBA, and now the NFL that will have a Boston, Canada type rivalry. And here's what I was thinking, because I initially was thinking Toronto, but Buffalo already sort of covers the Toronto market. So instead of going to Ontario, we're going to go to Quebec, and we're going to pick the city is Montreal, and they're called the Voyageurs, the Montreal Voyageurs. If I can add a little French to it. That's the AFC East, the Montreal Voyageurs. For those who don't know by the logos, this one was one of the easy ones if you knew what to look for in the logo. Kara called them the New Jersey river crossers or something like that. It's a dude in a boat, but the flag in the background's the Quebec or Montreal flag. Anyway, so the AFC North, which currently has Cincinnati, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, which are historic cities with, a lot of pride, a lot of hard hitting. The fans are great. Well, the fans in this city have been dying to get a team back, and we're giving them a team, and it's St. Louis. And they're the St. Louis Archers. Because of the arch, first off. That's easy, right? And then we can't call them the Rams because the Rams are already a team. And we're not going to make them blue, so we're going to make them the opposite. We'll make them red. Right? But the St. Louis Archers, with not only just arch, but we'll also have like the bow and arrow type symbolism as well because of archery, right? You see? The AFC South, which currently has the Colts, the Titans, the Texans, and the Jaguars. Well, we're expanding south a little bit as well. We already went to Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Now we're going south of the border to Mexico City, and we have the Mexico City Conquistadors. That's a working name. I like Aztecs or Trojans probably better. So we'll probably be the Mexico City Aztecs. I don't know, but something like that. And then the AFC West, which has the Chiefs, Chargers, Broncos, Raiders. We have Salt Lake City is the city, but that's not the team name. It's the Utah Yetis. Kara called them the Snow Apes, and I kind of want to change it to the Snow Apes now, but it's the Utah Yetis. So then we go to the NFC. We have the NFC East, which already has the Eagles, the Cowboys, the Giants, and the Commanders. And what I was thinking was, the Commanders are technically DC, though a lot of their fan base is in Virginia. And Virginia doesn't technically have a team until now. The Richmond Guardians. So the Richmond Guardians. The NFC North, which has the Packers, Bears, Lions, and Vikings. I'm sitting here thinking geographically around the teams. Minnesota has a team. Michigan has a team. Wisconsin has a team. What are the states around them that don't have a team? Oh, well, the Dakotas don't. And then I was trying to think, okay, what about having a team sort of like the Carolina Panthers, which represent North and South Carolina? I was going to call them the Dakota team name, but that doesn't sound real well. So we're basing it in the biggest city between the two Dakotas, and that is Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And it's the Sioux Falls, and I made up a word for the team name. It's the Sioux Falls Prairiers, right? The Prairiers, and represented by a bison, but the Sioux Falls Prairiers. In the NFC South, you have the Panthers, Saints, Falcons, and Buccaneers, and geographically there's a state that doesn't have a team that really has been yearning for a pro football team, because the only thing they have that's good in their life is the tide that rolls. So it's not Mississippi. It's Alabama. It's going to be Birmingham. The Birmingham Miners. Now, I'll be honest, this was a little tribute to my uncle who lives in Alabama, who was a miner who passed. So this is a little bit special for me. But the Birmingham Miners. And, of course, you play into the Roll Tide colors, so it's crimson, red, gray. Instead of white, I chose black, right? But the Birmingham Miners. In the NFC West, which has the 49ers, the Rams, the Seahawks, and the Cardinals, another team in that geographic location, we're going to have the Montana Mountaineers. Really cool logo, by the way. So there's my 8 teams. There's the, those are the 8 teams. Those are the divisions. Those are all of that, right? Let me know what y'all think. All right, last 2 questions. And these, Kara got real deep with these. She asked them earlier this morning, and I'm glad she got them in, because these have been the ones I've been contemplating the entire day at work. We're going to go with the easier one first. And that is, if we could erase the memory of death, every single memory that a person has of death, if we could erase that, would we as human beings still fear death? And this is a very good question. And at first I was like, I don't know how to answer this. So I asked for clarification. What do we mean by fear? And she says, just basic, to be afraid of. Now, I'm going to be honest. This isn't a phenomenon that I have experienced of being afraid of dying. I'm a little bit scared of how I'm going to die. I would prefer to die in my sleep. I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't want to, be in pain when I would rather not be tortured to death. But I don't think anyone would want to be tortured to death, right? I'm not afraid of the idea of dying. I think that's a worldview thing, and I'll get into that in a minute. And so the idea of being afraid of death isn't something that I consciously have. And I said it's worldview because to me, and this is something, if I can go back to like the Charlie Kirk situation where we saw this quote come out of something that Charlie said, that death is just a just a vehicle to home, right? And that's how I look at it, right? That death is just death is the vehicle that takes me to my permanent residence, right? And so I'm very hopeful. I say this like I love these questions because it allows me to analyze things through worldview. And I come back to the end of, and I love to end the episodes with these deeper questions. So it's the last thing that you guys hear before I leave. If there's anything of the last hour and 40 minutes, and however long this is going to take, if there's anything you take away, please be at the last answers of these questions, these last two questions. This is the most important part of the podcast to me, right? Because we're examining worldview. And I can't examine worldview without going to mine, which is from the sort of conservative Christian worldview. And I think if I read the room correctly, that's why these questions get asked. There seems to be a bit of controversy. Can I be honest though? I don't want to give away like who this person, who Kara is, right? I don't want to give away none of that. I don't, it's none of my business, right? But the first question the first statement I had when I saw these questions was, you're too young to be thinking this way. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't pretend to know the experience that this person has gone through. And I don't pretend to know that. But I was like, you're way too young, honestly, to be thinking about this concept. But I'm glad you're thinking about it because if I'm honest, I don't think people fear death. I don't. I think they fear how they're going to die. And what they really fear is what happens after death. What they fear is what happens after I die. Because from a secular worldview, and by secular I mean anti-God, right? So you have the secular and you have a theistic worldview, right? From a secular atheistic worldview, you were put here for no purpose at all. It's a very depressing worldview to hold. I've held it. I have. I've been there. I've been anti-God before. Nothing wanted to do with him, right? I've been there. But even if you're not inherently Christian, I think if you grew up in America, you had an understanding that life is temporary, and something happens on the other side of when your heart stops. That something is going to happen. It's actually one of the fundamental questions of human existence. Those questions are, who am I? What is my purpose? Who put me here? And what happens when I no longer exist? Those are the four questions of human experience that determines worldview. Your answers to those four questions determine how you see the rest of the world. And if you just believe that you're the result of a cosmic explosion, what I call the cosmic fart, cosmic flatulence, is essentially what the Big Bang Theory is. That all of the created matter in the universe, now imagine how big the universe is right now, and then understand that it's currently still expanding. That all of that was pressurized into the, no lie, this is how it used to be explained, all of that was pressurized, forced together, packed it all the way together. Open up any book you have in front of you and look at the size of a period on the page, right? that all of the matter in the universe, you, me, mountains, the sea, Mars, Saturn, all the rings, all the moons, the asteroid belt, the Milky Way, all of it was at the size of a period on the page, and it was so pressurized that there was a cosmic flatulence that caused everything to become what it was, to a specific place, to where if the earth was 1 inch closer or away, further away from the sun, there would be no life on earth. But that just happened. If that's your worldview, there is no meaning to all of this. And there is nothing that happens after death. You just are born, you live, you die, you get buried, you become worm food, and nothing happens. That's the atheistic, secular worldview. And I'm going to be honest with you, I would fear death if that was what my worldview was. I would be afraid of not having this existence anymore. I would be. But let me tell you about my worldview. That there was a designer who designed this. Right, because the question I always have for atheists who claim the Big Bang is, well, who created that? Right, because the first law, or one of the laws of science, is that matter cannot be created from non-matter, right? So scientifically, nothing cannot create something. But that's what the Big Bang Theory said. That everything came from nothing. So who created it? Well, we have an answer for that. In the beginning, God created. The only Hebrew phrase I know, I'm gonna press some of y'all. The only Hebrew phrase I know in the entire Bible is that verse, in the beginning God created. It's Bereshit Erachim Barach. Which literally Bereshit means Genesis or beginning. So literally it's translated, in the beginning created God. But you can actually change the words in Hebrew. In the beginning, Elohim, God, bara. Bara means to create, Latin phrase here, ex nihilo, meaning to create nothing from something. Or excuse me, to create something from nothing. That the uncreated, always existing God of the universe created something. He's the source behind the creation. He's the power. He spoke it into existence. And everything that happens because this God is sovereign and is working out a plan. That's my worldview. That he wants to have relationship with you. So much so that we read the creation account, and what we realize, we see in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created. We see then in Genesis 1:4 that God then, the word created, or sometimes God made, the word in Hebrew is actually asa. I'm a nerd out a little bit with this answer, and it might take a while. It's actually asa in Hebrew, and that word actually means to form or to make habitable. Right? And essentially what we see is that God created earth specifically for human beings to dwell in. And he formed it, and the reason human beings were created last was because he formed his garden earth to be his kingdom, and he created humans to have dominion on the earth in relationship with him. He loves us so much that he gave us a garden. And by the way, in ancient religious connotations, the garden was seen as the temple of God. He wanted to live with us. And we rebelled against his authority, separated ourselves from him, and he said, you know what? That doesn't surprise me. I knew that would happen. I still love you. In fact, before I created any of this, I had a plan to redeem you from your own rebellion. That I myself, the just judge, right, the only source of righteousness, would come from heaven, come from my garden to this sinful place. And I'm not going to clear your guilt. I'm going to take the penalty that you deserve. I'm going to be the substitute. So, big words here. I'm going to nerd out a little bit. It's called penal substitutionary atonement. This is very essential. If you're a Christian listening to this, this doctrine is under attack in the church today by the liberal progressives who are trying to make God seem nice. Right? Too nice. Like they want to be nicer than God is. They don't want to show wrath. But here's what happened, right? Here's the bad news. God made a covenant with Adam in the garden. He said, hey, you can eat of any tree of this garden except this one. The day you eat of it, your penalty is death. Contract was made. Right? The contract was made. Adam, here's your responsibilities. Here's your penalties if you break this. You will die. You will be separated from me. You will die. The penalty of rebellion, the Bible actually says the wages, meaning we earn this, right? You only get wages if you do works, right? So the writer Paul, this is from the book of Romans, the writer Paul has spent the first 5 chapters of his book, and really the first 5 and then into chapter 6 as well, explaining that the law and keeping the law, and by law I mean the law of God, the commands that God gave Israel and the Hebrew people, that by keeping that, it's a mirror that shows that you're not righteous and that you can't live up to the standard, which is perfection. That's the entire reason he gave the law, was to show that we were dependent upon him, right? And that she lost my train of thought. That we're dependent upon God, right? Because we can't keep the law. And our works, because we're human beings and we're self-righteous, we think we can earn our way to God, right? Our works that we deserve for our rebellion, the payment, it says the wages of sin, the wages of our rebellion, the wages that we have earned is death. But the free gift of God is eternal life. So you don't have to fear death no more. And I know I've gone on a rabbit trail to answer this question, but I have to tell you my worldview. I don't fear death because I know that penalty, I can now shout with the rest of God's redeemed people, "Oh death, where is your sting?" I can now shout with the writer Paul saying, "To live, well, that's for Christ, but to die, oh, that's for my benefit." If he's going to keep me here, I'm going to live for him. But if he's gracious enough to take me out of this world, and this is a man who wrote that in prison about to be beheaded, and if I'm going to die, well, you're just sending me to my final home where I'm going to live with my Savior, right? So I don't fear death, right? Now, to answer the question, I don't think we fear death the way we think we fear death. Even now. I heard this beautifully explained, actually, on this topic, is that the first lie that Satan told us was, did God really say? Immediately after that, The second lie was, eat, you're not going to die. I think he continues to deceive us into thinking we're not going to die. And I heard it explained this way. It's like you're at a it's like human life is like a party. The human experience is a party, right? Loud music, we're all dancing, having a good time, right? And every 10 minutes, now, for the sake of the story, 1 minute equals 10 years, right? So every 10 minutes, so that's 100 years in the story, right? A monster comes in, and he takes one person out, and he kills them, and he eats them. And for a period of time, let's say 10 minutes, we grieve, we mourn, we recognize that death happens. But after 10 minutes, the band starts playing again. We carry on, we forget about it. And then it happens again. And we mourn for a little bit, and then we pick back up. And that's human existence, right? Someone close to us dies, and we think about death. And we start to get anxious, and we start to get scared. But then we have to go back to work, and life starts picking up, and we forget. And we forget that one day that monster's coming, and it's going to be us. We don't fear death the way I think we should. Here's why I think the enemy, Satan, does that, to where we actually don't think about death as much as we should. Because if we thought about death the way that we should, we would do something about it. We would prepare for the afterlife. And he doesn't want that to happen. And so he allows us to mourn for a week or so. And then we forget. And we continue like in our life, like our death isn't happening. Here's a sobering reality. In 100 years, none of us would be here. In 100 years, it's a simple quote. I forgot who said it, but he said, in 100 years, new people. There will be an entire earth full of new people in 100 years that were not here today. That's the reality. So if we could erase the memory of death, will we stop fearing it? No. Well, first off, I think it depends on the worldview you look through. But secondly, I don't think we fear death now. I think we're deceived. I hope that answers your question. Like, I'm not trying to be rude or like passive, like trying to like pass the question, like skip over it. Like, that's the best answer that I have for you. And then the last one, probably going to be an even longer response, by the way. God, I love this question. I really do. Can I just be honest with you guys? I want to be real and be raw and be relevant, right? And this is being real and being raw with you. When I saw this question, I've been 100% real with you. Two things happened when I read this question. One, I got a little bit excited because I get to share with you the hope that I have. That excites me, y'all. That excites me. In the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk assassination, my best friend, who wanted nothing to do with talking about theology or church, we went to a memorial, and him and his fiance started talking to me about church. And I got to invite him to my church. And he's getting baptized this Sunday, y'all. You don't understand how much this means to me, right? This Charlie Kirk thing woke something up inside of me. Like, this is all I want to talk about. This is all I want to talk about. Right? Because I want to get you guys prepared for what happens if you were. Like, I don't want to be the person anymore that's that is nonchalantly living through life, not giving you guys your house is on fire. And what good of a person am I to see that your house is on fire and not tell you about it? I think it's my responsibility not to change your heart. It is solely up to you and what God does in your heart. I'm not here to force you to believe what I believe. I'm not. You guys can believe whatever you want to believe. My job is not to convert you guys, to change your heart. Who am I to do that? Like I don't have the ability to do that. That's a supernatural miracle that takes place when that happens. I don't have that power. But I've been given a commission by my master, and that is biblical language. We go from being slaves to sin to slaves to our Savior, and my master has given me the command to go and tell the rest of the world about this hope. And for the longest time, I just nonchalantly lived life not doing that. But this Charlie Kirk thing woke something up in me. This is all I want to talk about. Y'all can ask me questions about this topic every single day of the week, and it will get me excited. So that's the first thing, is I got excited because I get to share my Jesus with you guys. But I also... I felt some hurt that, again, someone so young had this question. And I've been praying over this question all day. I called one of the guys. So I meet with a group of people every Friday, and I text the group chat and said, "Hey, can I call a group of you all?" And I didn't give any details on who it was or who asked the question or anything. And none of that was given. I just said, "Hey, I had a friend, and I need y'all to pray about this question. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to talk about it on a podcast that has nothing to do with Christianity. This is solely a wrestling and a sports podcast, but I've opened up any question to be asked for this reason. And I just need you to pray that I give the best answer that I can, and that, that if something were to happen, God, you don't understand, this means something to me. Y'all are my family if you listen to this, right? And what good would I be to allow, or to not at least warn you guys and to give you the hope, right? I hope my hope is that when you hear me speak, and I'm trying to 100% trying to make a concerted effort over the last several months to clean up my language and to not live like the rest of everyone else. I've been making a concerted effort to do that. And I fail, y'all. I suck at this, right? I suck at this life thing, man. I really do. But I'm so glad. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I'm so glad it's not determined about me, man. So the question is this: if the universe ends today, does everything we've ever done lose all its meaning, or was the meaning only ever done in the doing? Now, again, it's a worldview question. So the question is this. The answer is this, actually. If you have the secular atheistic worldview, everything you've ever done when you die has no meaning. It falls away, you get buried into the ground, you become worm food, and you have no purpose. So here's the thing that I tell people all the time. If you want to live that way, if that's your worldview, go all out, man. Experience life. Commit crime. Have as much sex as you possibly can. Like 100%, if that's your worldview, if there's no purpose here, that means there's no, first off, that means there's no morality. That morality is subjective. Nothing is wrong. Stealing isn't wrong to you if we're just, the product of a extraterrestrial flatulence. If that's what we are, if there's no creator, no purpose, no morality, no sense of right or wrong, Do whatever you want, dude. Experience life. Murder's not wrong. Go do it, man. You got someone you don't like. See, that is the byproduct of the atheistic, evolutionary, secular worldview. There is no purpose. I don't understand someone who has that worldview that isn't doing this whatever they want. That lives, like, I don't understand moral atheist. I don't. It makes no sense to me. Your worldview says that morality doesn't exist. Why are you living by it? It doesn't exist. It's subjective. It's the result of oppressors, really. That's actually what Karl Marx said, was that religion is the ultimate oppressor, and he wanted to kill God and the church. Because if he freed people from religion, he could truly get them to be free from all oppression, and they could do whatever they want. That's the end goal of communism. It's the end goal of evolutionary thought, is to have a complete anarchist society where you can do whatever you want, and that ends in chaos and death. That's the end result of that. So if that's your worldview, then yes, when your life ends, when the world ends, if that's what happens, right? If I'm wrong and that's what happens, and the universe ends, and there's no afterlife, there's no judgment, there's no God, none of that. If I'm wrong and the universe ends, everything you've ever done in your life is absolutely meaningless. In fact, the Bible actually says that. Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, the richest man recordedly to have ever lived in his time period. There's evidence to show that Mansa Musa was probably richer. But the richest man to ever live, the wisest man to ever live, this man had 300 wives and 700 concubines. Not even kidding, he could have sex with a different woman every day of the year for 3 years and still not go through his entire harem. Or, well, about that. He'd get through it it's actually about 2 and 3/4 years. Right? But you get the point. It would take him over 36 months to sleep with he could sleep with a different woman every single day for 36 months and still not go through his entire harem. That Solomon, the guy who experienced life to its abundance, experienced all of that and wrote in the book of Ecclesiastes, it's all meaningless. Vanity of vanities, declares the preacher. Vanity of vanities. That's the evolutionary life without God. But if you have my worldview, meaning is determined by the source of meaning, and that is God. If you have the Christian worldview, the things you do on earth matter. Now, you're not saved, you're not redeemed, you're not going to go to heaven by the things that you do. But meaning doesn't end when the universe does, because there's something after all of that. Because meaning doesn't come from the universe, it comes from God. The story of creation is not a circular story that ends in nothing, but it's a big word here, teleological, meaning that everything moves towards a purpose. So every act, every moment of obedience, every prayer, right, it's all woven into one giant story. Everything you do has a purpose, has a meaning. It all leads to the same thing. In Christian terms, meaning is not just in the doing, but in who it's done for. Right? And here's the hope. Here's the hope, right? I've covered a lot of bases. That this is sort of what we call, the gospel. That we're broken, that God created us perfect, that we ruined it. We screwed it up big time. Adam representing human beings as the federal head, right? So, and let me explain federal headship real quick, because that's a big word. That is the federal head in the way of Donald Trump represents America. You may not like Donald Trump. You may not think what he does is right. You may not agree with what he does. But if Donald Trump declared war on a country and we went to war, guess what? He represents us. We're at war. So I'm gonna create a fictional country. Let's say the country of, let's say we find Atlantis again. Atlantis is underwater, but let's just say Atlantis was a country, right? And Donald Trump declared war on Atlantis. I may love the people of Atlantis, but if Donald Trump declared war, guess what? Atlantis is going to declare war on us as well. Me being represented, this idea of being represented by something is foreign to us in Western culture. But Adam, the first man, represented mankind. Let me explain this in a sports metaphor, right? If I played offensive line, I played left tackle, most important position on the offensive line, right? I'm protecting the quarterback's blind side, right? We're on an away game. It's loud. I can't hear the snap count. I jump off sides. I'm the one that committed the foul. Am I the only one that has to go back 5 yards? No. The whole team does. One player commits the foul, the whole team is penalized. That's federal headship. Adam represented us. He messed up. He sinned. That means we all sin. Sin is actually passed through blood. That's why Jesus had to come as a virgin birth. In the virgin birth. Everyone, oh, that's a fictional story. No. There's a reason for that. Because sin passes through the patriarch, the father. It passes through the seed of the father. And if Jesus would have been born through natural means, he would have been born with a sin nature. So that's why the virgin birth is the most important thing in the story. He had to be born clean. So here's the bad news. In our natural state, apart from God doing anything, because guys, let me tell you, we don't do one thing to earn salvation. We can't earn it. We can't say, don't you know who you're talking to? You can't be good enough. I said this last week on the podcast, that scripturally, our best works, when compared to the standard of God, the Bible describes them as menstrual pads, dirty, bloody menstrual rags. That we can't earn our way to God. It says that God shows no partiality. He doesn't care about skin color or race or gender or socioeconomic level or what tribe you're from, what football team you cheer for, right? He doesn't have favoritism towards the Patriots. I know it feels like it because we got 6 Super Bowls, but he doesn't show favoritism to his Patriot fans. Let me get a little bit more serious, but God is not partial. He is just. He judges fairly. And when he looks at us in our natural state, apart from him doing anything, we don't meet the standard. We're all doomed for an eternity of separation and death away from him, away from paradise. But God. I mentioned a guy named Paul a lot. He writes 13 of the 27 New Testament books. It's written by a guy named Paul. Amazing story. His birth name was Saul. He was a Jew of all Jews. Probably was going to be high priest at some point. He actually committed the first martyrdom of the church to a man named Stephen. He held the coats. We know he was on the road to Damascus to kill more Christians, by the way, when he was blinded by a light, which was the visible person of Jesus. Blinded for 3 days, was converted. On the way to kill Christians, Jesus spoke to him physically and said, "Why are you persecuting me?" This man goes on to write 13 of the 27 books of the New Testament. And in the book of Ephesians, the letter he wrote to the church in Ephesus, the Ephesian letter, he writes, I want to get this right. I want to quote it right. I'm very bad at remembering things. I want to get this right. In the letter he writes to the Ephesian church, it's Ephesians. If you want to look this up, I'm not lying to you. It's Ephesians chapter 2. And we're going to go 1 through, I don't remember where this section ends. But it says, in you, that means all of us. He's actually speaking to Christians, but he says, so you Christians were dead in your trespasses in which you and sins in which you formerly walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, that's Satan, in the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. He says, among them, we, Christians, all formerly lived in the lust of our flesh, indulging in the desires of the flesh, and were, by nature, we were created to be children of wrath, even as the rest of creation. But the greatest but to ever exist in humanity, but God. Right? So what were we before God stepped in? We were dead in our sins, deserving of punishment. But God, being rich in mercy and because of his love for which he has loved us, even when we were sinners, even when we were dead in our transgressions, he made us alive in Christ and raised us up and seated us with Christ. We're going to reign with him. You skip down to verse 8. He says, for by grace you have been saved, not of your, but through faith. That's a gift, by the way. We'll get to that in a second. By grace you have been saved through faith, not of yourself, but the gift of God, not of the results of your work, so that no one can boast. Why do I read that for? Because that is what we call the gospel. We were sinners. We deserved to die and be separated from God forever. Jesus came, born of a virgin, meaning he could not sin. He was God and man at the same time. Lived the perfect life that the law required so that he could be the sacrifice that the law demanded. The book of Romans chapter 3 verse 25 says he was the propitiation. And all that word means, we don't actually have a word in English to describe that Greek word properly, but it essentially means he was the substitutionary atonement. He fulfilled, by Christ dying, he fulfilled the demands that the contract that Adam signed with God. The punishment was death, and he fulfilled that demand. Right? And I know I've sort of strayed away from the heart of the question, but I did so on purpose. Because apart from Christ, 100%, you should fear death. Apart from Christ, everything you ever do on this earth has no meaning. Vapor upon vapor. You'll disappear. Your homies will sell your car. There's a song by a Christian rap group called Gideon's Army. You can't find it on Spotify or Apple Music. You got to go to YouTube. They took all their stuff down for some reason. I don't know. But it's on YouTube, and it's a song. I think it's called Celebrity. Let me see. I'm going to pull it up. Yeah, I think it's called Celebrity. And essentially it says that your homies going to take at the funeral, your homies aren't going to cry for you. They're going to take your Cadillac. They're going to take the 24s off of it. And they're going to sell the Cadillac. Right? You're just going to be vapor. And they're going to continue doing life. And they're going to mourn for a little bit. But they're just going to continue doing life. That's the secular worldview. But let me tell you about my Jesus. And if you are in him, and I pray that this speaks to you where you are, and that God does great work. Because it's not me. I'm not smart enough to do this. I'm not smarter than any of you. I've learned a lot of things over time and study, but I'm no better than any of you. Right? In fact, I take the posture that I tell you about this man, Paul, that he took. He said, like I said, he was probably going to be high priest, and he called himself the chief of sinners. I'm the worst of the worst, is what he said. And I take that posture that I'm no better than any single one of you listening to this. I need Jesus just like you do, because I know I can't do this by myself. If I was left to my own devices, I don't even want to imagine where I would be. Right? So to answer those questions, apart from Jesus, yes, I would say you should fear death. Because the judgment that is coming, and I want to be real, and I want to be frank, I want to be honest, I want to be raw with you. I would be doing you a disservice to not tell you this. I do this out of love, right? I really do. As family. The judgment that's coming for those who are not in Christ, I would be very afraid of. But if you're in Christ, that you have nothing to fear. Because that punishment has already been paid. It's been paid. I don't know. I feel like I've sort of held you all here long enough. I think I've beaten this dead horse. I just hope that the seed gets planted. I don't know. I'm excited for this, right? I love these type of questions. And there's not an answer more than what I gave you that I feel can answer any better to how I see the question and to my worldview, right? And so, I'm just going to say this. I'm not going to do it on this episode. I'm not going to do it on the mic. But I'm going to finish recording. I just want to let everybody know who's listening to this. You're family to me. As family, don't take this the weird way. I love you. And this means a lot to me. I don't say that to coerce you into believing something you don't believe. I say that to let you know that because this cares for me, if you need me, if you got questions, if you want to talk about it, DM me, whatever. But also know, I'm going to be praying. And like I said, I told these guys that I'm saying this on my podcast tonight. And these dudes pray. And they're going to ask me, I already know this. We're meeting on Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern. Just know this. When we get together, they're going to ask me, hey, have you heard anything back about it? How'd that conversation go? I'll say this, if you feel something listening to this, don't hesitate. Don't hesitate. If you got questions, I don't have all the answers, but I know the one who does. And we can sit here and we can talk about it. Whether it's through DM. I know this is kind of weird, but if y'all, I mean this, if y'all want to, we're on Discord. There's a call feature on Discord. We don't even have to exchange phone numbers. I will sit with you and talk to you about this. 100%. This means more to me than wrestling, than pro football, than any of this, right? These are great things to love and to enjoy, but this is more important to me. And that's why I gave it as much time as I did. And I know this might seem a little bit repetitive and monotonous to end every week the same way, but guys, I do it because I love y'all, right? I'll be honest, I'm rambling. I don't know how to end this. I told you I'm bad at this. So we'll just end it there. I just know I'm praying for you. And I'm here for y'all no matter what. Right? And with that, I thank you all for listening to this long episode of the podcast, the Slapping Meat Wrestling Community. Or really, the Slapping Meat Community Show. That's what we are, right? The Slapping Meat Community Show. I appreciate you all for listening. And until the next episode, have a great rest of your week. I'll see you on Tuesday.
So hit that and subscribe, come along for the ride, whether it's NXT or NFL time. Going in the ropes and forth and deep, slapping meat community every Tuesday.